Hi, Donald here with Floating Feathers Kayak Fly Fishing School and another tips and tricks. And this tips and tricks is kind of deciphering what fly rod weights mean what. So real quick, and I'm going to try to make this just a couple-minute video. Fly rods are weighted, and what I mean by weight is that kind of determines the size of the rod. And I don't mean the length, I mean the diameter of the rod and essentially the strength of that rod. Okay? They go from 000 weight all the way up to 16 weight and maybe above. The smaller the number, the smaller the rod diameter and the less strength that rod has, okay, overall. So the size of the rod does not necessarily determine the size of the fish. It does to a point. We'll get to that in just a moment. But the size of the rod is more to do with the size of the fly that you're throwing rather than the size of the fish that you're targeting, okay? Now, and what I mean by that is if you're going for trout, anything of a 5-6 weight is probably as max as you want to go for a trout because of the size of flies that you were throwing. Even with some of the streamers, you're not throwing that big of a streamer. Now there are some people out there that fish with 7 weights on a trout, nothing wrong with that. But if you're throwing small flies, right, you can still land a 20, 22, 23, 24-inch trout on a 5-weight rod. It's going to happen. It happens all the time. Okay, on a 3-weight rod, you can do the same thing, but it's more determined about the size of the fly that you're throwing. So the smaller the fly, usually the smaller the rod you want to use. Okay, remember, 0 weight or 000 weight is the smallest. The higher you go in numbers, the bigger diameter and the heavier the rod becomes. So at a 16 weight, you're looking at a really super heavy duty rod. For those of you that are conventional fishing or trying to transfer over from conventional fishing or even understand a little bit about conventional fishing, if you look at it like a 000 weight to a 3 weight, that's like your ultralights, okay? A 4 to 6 weight in fly fishing is kind of like your light action rods. A 7 to 8 weight is like your medium to medium heavy rods. Your 9 to 10 weights are your heavy rods. Those are your big boys, right? And then 11 weights and above in fly fishing is kind of like your super heavy or saltwater rods in conventional fishing. And traditionally in fly fishing, 11 weights and above are usually exactly that, saltwater rods. They've got a huge backbone. They've got really strong, heavy rods. They're big diameter, and they're just made to heave in huge fish. Okay? Now, remember earlier when I said the rod doesn't determine the size of the fish. That is true up to a certain point. Now once you get up to about a 10 weight and above or 11 weight and above, you can throw small flies for tarpon and catch tarpon on them, okay? But can you do it with a 3 weight? I'm sure it could be done, but you're going to tire that fish out and make that fish just, you're probably never going to catch the fish and you're just going to waste a lot of energy. That fish is going to exude a lot of energy and it's just going to get, it's just not a good situation. Okay, so up to about a 10 or 11 weight, the size of the rod is determined by the size of the fly you're throwing. The bigger the fly, the bigger the rod. Okay, now up to about 10 and 11 weight, doesn't really matter what size of fly you're throwing because that begins the kind of contradictory thing in fly fishing where it's no longer about the size of the fly, it's about the size of the fish and the strength of that fish that you're going after or you're targeting with that rod. So 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 weights, they're going to be huge, heavy rods and they're going to deal with big, heavy fish, tarpon, GTs, things like bonefish, big redfish, you know, monster redfish, or as everybody calls them, bull reds, and that really doesn't make sense because they're females, but whatever. You know, these big fish that are heavy and fast and just make giant runs. Things like that, that need heavy rods and heavy reels and extremely good drags to slow those fish down. You're not going to be able to do that with a smaller rod. It's just not going to happen. So that's a lot of information right there. Kind of boil it all back down. 000 to 16 weights in fly rods. Smaller the number, the smaller the fly, the smaller the rod in diameter. Lengths are a whole nother issue. We'll get into that in a different video later on. For now, I am Donald with Floating Feathers Kayak Fly Fishing School. Please tune in every Tuesday right here on the YouTube channel for more tips and tricks on fly fishing, kayaking, and how to fly fish from kayaks. Until next time, Thanks you all for watching, and tight lines and safe paddles.